Welcome everybody. My name is Sam. This is Heather. We are with the Openshaw Real Estate Group. We're going to get right into it today. Today we're going to talk about like your local market updates. Heather, we have some wonderful friends that do the Cromford Report. It's a Cromford Report. It's like they do data that covers the greater Phoenix area, everything to do with real estate. And we're going to kind of walk through that. But a huge shout out to the Cromford Report because this information is tremendously helpful when making a decision on whether to buy or sell or rent or invest. We look at this data almost daily here. So we're going to kind of go over it. I have like one of the first myths. I'm going to start.
Right,
I know you probably talked about it, but I'm going to take the first one. Heather, myth number one is the buyer demand is declining. How do you feel about that?
So we keep hearing that on the news and the local Facebook threads, even agent threads, Facebook threads. And the truth is the numbers tell a different story. So in 2022 and 2023, that was true, but it's no longer true today. So actually mortgage rates have knocked many buyers out of the game, but the demand is actually stable this year. And following last year's trend as well, we expect to see the same. So buyer demand currently is not declining.
Well, I think like when, like in 22 and 23, like they talk about here, definitely when rates went from like high 3s and 4s up to like 8 within a period of like 2 or 3 months, right? Like they more than doubled overnight. So yeah, there was a lot of buyers that left the market. There was a lot of buyers that couldn't necessarily like afford the market, right? Because we had inflated pricing coming out of COVID, but then you have the crazy high like interest rates. But like now, you know, I think people have like a 4-year memory span. So I think like we're starting to not forget the COVID times, but we're starting to realize that like we're kind of in like a normal interest rate range right now, you know, where people aren't like, well, I'm going to wait for the 3s or whatever to come back. Like that hopefully doesn't ever happen again, right?
Why don't you think it should happen again?
Because if we start seeing like 2s and 3s, like there is major things going on in the world. Like COVID, right? That was a huge pandemic that affected the entire globe. And although financially, yes, that'd be super cool when money is cheap, but it's very, very scary because there is something going on in the world that is affecting the entire world. So no, we don't want to see those rates ever again. We don't want to see them.
Right. So the buyers are out, and the truth is buyers buy because of things going on in their lives.
Right.
So of course they want a low interest rate. Of course we want inflation to be under control. But at the end of the day, people get divorces, people have kids, they have to upsize, downsize. Unfortunately, people pass away and people have to move. And you can only be stuck in that space for so long before demand comes back out and they realize, okay, these interest rates are probably here to stay. So let's go ahead and make that move.
Yeah, I think it's like ties back to one of the podcasts we did a while ago is like if it makes sense, you know, on a monthly payment or it makes sense to you, I mean, it's always a good time to buy.
Right. So myth number 2, there's nothing to buy under $300,000 in the greater Phoenix area.
Oh man. I would say like during the COVID times, 100%. Like there wasn't much under 300 anymore in the greater Phoenix area. Today, like it seems like we have some more coming to the market, right? Like prices are getting corrected. There are like price corrections going on. I wouldn't say like a crash or a huge price drop, but definitely the market is slowing down. There are some, you know, there's condos still available under 300. There's like manufactured homes under 300. There's land you can get under 300.
Let me give you some numbers.
Yeah.
So in February of 2022, there was only 90 single family homes available for sale in under 300,000 in Maricopa and Pinal County. So to compare that today, there's 534. Those are mostly in Pinal County. And if you add the inventory, like you talked about for townhomes and condos, in 2022 of February, there was only 156 active. And right now there's more than 1,200. All of those are mostly in Maricopa County. So we went from 90 to 534. So that's a really big jump. And that's great news for our first-time home buyer population. All right, myth number 3, you ready? My income is too high to qualify for any home buyer assistance programs.
Oh, for home buyer assistance programs.
Yes.
I was like, nobody's ever said I make too much money.
Yes.
Man.
So the news behind it is basically down payment assistance programs actually correlate to areas, not necessarily income. So there are high income limits, some as high as $150,000 a year actually, and some actually don't have limits at all. You can, for example, we just helped some of your sellers find a buyer in Pinell County, and they were able to buy with 100% financing, no down payment down there in order to get them in that home. So, and there was no income requirements on that.
Right, and that's like a USDA
Yep.
style loan. What is like, take 5 seconds to just explain to everybody though, like what is a down payment assistance program? Like I think that's huge right now.
So the government wants people to buy new homes, and they want to give incentives for that to happen. And say they do that in areas that maybe need more economic stimulus and something to happen. So for example, Sam just mentioned the USDA loan. So there is a loan that you can get 100% financing, and is for more rural areas. If you reach out to us, we can share where those zones are that you can qualify for those at. But rural is a lot different depending on who you talk to. So rural is actually Pinell County. And so the government would like for people to build houses in Pinell County, and they want to have affordable housing for people. And so they create these programs and put aside a bundle of money to help our population continue to invest in home ownership. So right now we know the average age of a first-time home buyer is 38, and so they're going to do what they can to incentivize people to buy their first homes, because we know home ownership builds better families, better economy, better community. And so those are just grants that you can use, and our preferred home lenders can help you walk through that so you can kind of see if you're eligible and how that can work.
And I think like there is some like truth to this myth. Like, yeah, the more money that you make, the harder it is to go get like a down payment assistance program. But I mean, I'm gonna talk as if I was your dad or uncle right here. Like, you make more money, we should be able to save more money faster, right? I think we talked about it with like, people are buying the experiences rather than like investing in real estate and stuff. So I think like, I hate to say it, but like, we might have to sacrifice a little bit.
Right.
Maybe not do the Starbucks or the brand new vehicle for the next 2 or 3 years to save up money for a down payment. So yeah, there is some truth, but I think it's cool to mention it's not necessarily always about the income, it's about the area. I think it's worth a shot because it's totally free to at least talk to our lender about it and see if you do qualify. If you don't, hey, he'll tell you what you do qualify for, but it's worth a shot. Worth a shot.
So myth number 4 actually ties right into that. So some people think that you have to be a first-time home buyer in order to qualify for those home buyer assistance programs, which is actually not true. So first-time home buyer could be a definition, and you may think of it as you've never purchased a home before, but in the eyes of a lot of these programs, and according to HUD's definition, it's you just haven't had to own a home in 3 years or more. So if you haven't owned a home in 3 years or more, to qualify for these programs, you're technically still a first-time home buyer, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of myths around like first-time home buyers. And when I hear people say like, hey, I'm a first-time home buyer, what I think like a lot of people are meaning is like, I need to qualify for like a FHA, like a smaller down payment program, or like this one's saying the home buyer assistance program. There's so many ways around it that it's not technically your first home, like you talked about. Like if you haven't owned a home in 3 years, or if you own a mobile home,
Or if you get a divorce
yeah,
and you owned it with your spouse, you're considered a first-time home buyer
exactly.
again.
There's just a few ways, but again, like I don't think this is the time to sit here and like dissect this one, but like you basically get in front of us and guide you to a lender and like talk specifics, but know that there are options out there, right? Like there's so many flexibilities in real estate and within even FHA programs or down payment assistance programs that again, like if you're even considering making a transaction, buying a house, I think you need to get in front of a really good, knowledgeable lender. Like I think lenders and realtors kind of hand in hand, where there's good ones and bad ones, right? Like I think you can interview lenders, but you want like a really, really good one.
Yep.
That knows it. Okay, I'm gonna take myth number 5 because you're hogging all of these. Mortgage rates are too high There's nothing to be done about it. This is a good one. This is all over the news right here.
Yeah, so 57% actually of January sales in the Greater Phoenix market between $200,000 and $600,000 actually involved seller paid incentives. And so I know later we're going to go through some graphs and show what those numbers are and how they differ depending on the city you're looking at. But those numbers, the reason why they're so high is they're designed to help create an interest rate buy down. You want to talk about what that is?
So interest rate buy down, there's a few different options. And again, like your lender is very, very key. We have a great lender that can explain the pros and cons to each like buy down stuff. But you can, like the sellers nowadays on some occasions, I bet it's about 55% of houses now, transactions, are getting some sort of like buyer concessions. Buyer concessions is basically the seller is giving you a credit that you can use toward like closing costs or to buy your rate down. So like, let's say just for easy math, rates are at a flat 7% today, and that's what you qualify for, 7%. You can use some of those buyer concessions to buy your rate down to where you can get in at a 6% or maybe even as low as like 5.5%. There is a certain amount of percentage or dollars that can be allotted to that. But again, like your lender will be able to like map it out. But just know that there are different ways to buy your rate down. So you can permanently buy it down. So a fixed rate at, say, if you were at 7, you could buy it down to 6. You will be at 6 for the next 30 years. There are programs like a 3-2-1, 2-1, and a 1-0 buy down. Basically, you buy your rate down 3% for the first year, then it's 2% lower the next year, and then 1% the third year, and then the fourth year you're back at your prime rate for the next 26 years or whatever. I like my comment on like mortgage rates are too high. We talked about it podcast ago, but like people don't necessarily buy on like overall price. They buy on like their monthly payment and what they can afford on a monthly payment. So like quick facts, what I like about interest rates is if it works good for you and it makes sense, then like pull the trigger, because we hear this a lot. Like, I'm waiting for interest rates to go down. Yeah, so is the rest of the world. So right now you can get in with like little to no competition. Sellers are most sellers are willing to negotiate on price or inspections or repairs, give you money for like a buy down, right? So like, if it makes sense now, I pull the trigger. What's cool, if you buy now, you can always refinance. But when you refinance, you don't have to compete with 50 other offers, right? You can just refinance. Let's say that rates end up going back up. Let's say you're at a 7 and they go to 9 or 10, who knows? Good news, you got locked in at the lowest rate possible, right? But again, you don't have to fight with competition with the rest of the world, waiting for rates to slow down to get back into the game.
Yep.
Right.
One other really creative idea, and our team actually executes on this, not just talks about it. So if this is something that interests you, make sure you reach out to us. But right now, across the nation, 75% of all mortgages have an interest rate of 5% or lower.
Right.
And so what that means is there is a large portion of those that actually have a VA loan or an FHA loan, which are assumable. So that means somebody has the ability to keep that interest rate. And so, and they're all below 5%, 75% are below 5%. And actually in our market right here, the Greater Phoenix area, about 10% of the listings that are active today actually fit that criteria. And so there's 24,000 active listings, give or take, right now on the market today. So how many, 10% of that is going to be, what did you say?
2,500.
There's 2,500 houses out there to pick from that actually have a 5% or lower interest rate. With the right people on your side, can actually help you keep that interest rate, and is going to be a huge, huge, huge savings for you on your regular payment, your everyday payment, or your monthly payment that you're making regularly.
And there were, so going back to 75% of mortgages right now are 5% or lower. 12 months ago, we were at almost 90%. So we're losing about 12 or so percent, every year.
Every year.
Because there's, this year there's right around, or in 24, there was about 4.1 million transactions done. And then this year they're predicting a little bit higher, like 4.2 million transactions being done. So you'll see that 75% at 5% mortgage or lower, you're going to start to see that number start to dwindle. And I talked about Americans, we have like a short-term memory, kind of like 4 years at a time.
Yeah.
We're going to start to like phase out that the 2s and 3s are normal and start to see that like the 6s, mid 6s, even high 6s is like where it needs to be and where normal is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of hoping and predicting that like the end of 25 and into 26, things start to get a little bit busier.
Yeah. All right, myth number 6. You want it?
Sure, I'll read it, give it to you. Housing is in a bubble and home prices are on the brink of a crash.
Yep. That's what the news wants to tell us. And actually, Greater Phoenix has already had a bubble and went down in 2022, where they rose to their peak and then declined 12.3% from May to December, all in that same year. The truth is, during that year, the people who took the biggest brunt, though, were the short-term investors in that market. So since then, it's stabilized. Most price ranges are actually seeing less than 2% appreciation year over year, which is actually less than inflation. And so to add that, in 2022, when sales prices were averaging 2.4% over list price. That's not what's happening right now, with the exception of luxury market, which is a completely different market right now in the Greater Phoenix area than all the rest of it.
So like things I think of is, they talked about like the short-term investors. So like that's your flippers, right? I think it was very scary and difficult for the flippers because if you have like a decent sized house that takes 2 or 3, 4 or 5 months to like fix up, that's a lot of money you have out in that period of time. Well, they took rates from 3% and put them at 6 and 7%. It felt like overnight. So a lot of those flippers, they got caught in that mix, and it's very unfortunate for them. But I mean, that's part of the world that we live in. I think it is also difficult for like long-term investors like that buy and hold because like our rental rates haven't really increased near as fast as like the interest rate has increased. So there's a lot of investors out there that bought homes in 21, 22, and then when the interest rates took off, they just underwater. So I think there's a lot of them that are unfortunately kind of losing money every month, but it'll come back and they'll be all right long term for sure.
Well, the truth is, if you're just buying a house off the market, or on the market, excuse me, right now in the Greater Phoenix area, if you want to cash flow on an investment property, you unfortunately have to put probably 40% down right now. So there's deals to be had here and there. In our team, we have tools to find those deals, and we totally use that. And if you're just average Joe going to buy a house and going to rent it, you're probably going to have to put 40% down in order for that to cash flow for you. So, okay, last myth. We hear this. I'm going to sell my house as is, and I'm going to price it aggressively with buyer incentives.
So like when I hear a seller say that they're going to sell their house as is, they're kind of telling me that they don't want to do like any repairs. They either don't have like cash to put into it, or they don't have the time, the energy, the know-how. They don't know the people to make those fixes. So as like a listing agent, to be competitive in this market, you have to have like the condition of the house just like impeccable, right? Like it almost needs to be like new build status in order to compete, because in Arizona we still are competing heavily with new builds, and people's perception of a house, it needs to look like a new build. Feels like a super strong buyer's market as well. So like in order to package your house to sell it, it's got to be in like pristine condition, or you can't price it as if it's in pristine condition. So you have to, like, you can't say I'm not going to make any repairs, but I still want to get the maximum price that the market is telling me. If you don't want to make any repairs and have it a little bit distressed, you need to kind of distress your price a little bit, or it's going to sit and you're going to get beat up. Our team has different ways to work around that. We have the contractors, we have different incentives for you. So if you have a house that you don't want to make any kind of small repairs to, give me a call. We can work something out to where we can get your house fixed up, to where we can ask for a little bit more on the market for sure.
Right. So we have programs that solve that. So every single one of our listings gets an interior design and staging consultation, right? And if it's vacant, they all get staged. We can show that staged houses sell for 9 to 13% more than de-staged houses. The truth is when everybody is giving an incentive, aka price right, and incentive for concessions, which half of the market is, the only thing left to happen to stand out is your condition. And so it is really, really important now more than ever to get that house in right condition and work with the right team that can help you determine what that needs to look like.
When we go into like listing appointments, a lot of the conversation I have, it's like, okay, sellers, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. So let's imagine you come across the MLS, I send you a listing and like, hey, this house fits perfect. And it says like, seller is offering house as is. Like that scares so many buyers away because like your automatic thought is like, one, like what is wrong with that house? Like it's a total tear down. Like they go extreme. Buyers will go extreme and go, I don't want to buy that house. Like there's things that the seller knows is wrong with it, but they're not telling me what is wrong with it. So they get super scared. And when people get super scared, they don't transact, they don't do anything, they go somewhere else. So I mean, listing it and saying like I'm selling it as is will hurt you for sure. And you can understand and appreciate that you don't want to sell it like as is. Another thought that I have that I see come across is most buyers at almost any price range, I'd say more often than not, they're all stretching their financial limit as it is, right? Like they're putting every penny into a down payment. They're putting every penny they have cash, liquid cash to bring to the table to buy the house that they want. So if you were using all your cash to put a down payment down, to pay for closing costs, do you really want to come back in and fix plumbing issues, fix the dishwasher, do the landscaping, put new carpet in, put new paint in? No, you don't want to do that, right?
You want to go in there and live.
You want to go in there, turnkey, ready to go.
Yep.
Buyers have options nowadays, right? If they look at yours as is and they're going to have to drop $10,000 to $15,000 the day they move in just to live comfortably, they're going to go to your neighbor who has a move-in ready house and pay for that. They will even pay more for that, right?
Yep. So speaking of options, we're going to start talking about what the numbers actually look like in the greater Phoenix area. So buyers do have options. So right now there's about 28,000 active listings for sale in the greater Phoenix area. To compare that to 2 years ago, there was about 18,000 of them. And if you want to compare it back to when the market was crazy, the low was down to 3,100 houses in all of the greater Phoenix area. So we can see that the supply's gone up. There's 28,000 houses right now active. So how was that good for buyers?
I mean, it's excellent for buyers right now. This is definitely, although, you know, well, I mean, yeah, we are technically in a buyer's market right now. It's almost like a balanced market. But yeah, buyers have, you know, roughly 35% more options today than they did last year. And, you know, another 60% than they did 2 years ago. So buyers have options. And when buyers have options, sellers have to come up and compete.
And to add to this inventory number of about 28,000 does not take into consideration new build inventory that is not on the multiple listing service. So if you're in areas, the outskirts areas like Maricopa, Santan Valley, Queen Creek, Buckeye, things like that, this isn't the whole picture. It really, really is much more inventory. And also, oh, by the way, those are probably coming with 4% and 5% interest rates. So
for sure.
Something else I like to tell people is right now on average there's still 6,000 sales a month in the greater Phoenix area. So are people buying and selling? 100% they are. 6,000 of them in fact have. To compare that to 2 years ago, it's about 6,500, so just down 500 over the grand scheme of things. Not a bad place to be in. So what this means is if there's 28,000 active listings but we're only selling 6,000 a month, that's only 1 in 4 houses are selling. So what do you tell your sellers about that? Do
you want to be the one that sells, or do you want to be the 3 that help the one sell? Right? I mean, that's your competition is the active listings out there. So if you want X price, you better make sure that your condition is quite a bit bigger and better than your competition. or price it right, for sure.
Right. So something interesting is the days on market, it's actually stayed relatively the same. It's 79 days right now. It was 82 years ago. So what that means is for the average agent on the average house, it's taking them about 80 days or so to get under contract. So I want to add to that. So in our market, how we track our numbers, we put it under contract accepting backup offers, which really is technically not taken off the market. And so plus we still have to count escrow days. And so if you take out the excluding the under contract properties that are waiting for an offer, they're at 122 days. So the point in all of that is, listen, if you were planning on your house selling the first weekend, if you price it right and it's in great condition, that still can happen, and it's probably going to take you a little longer to sell. So if you need to get somewhere at a certain time, it's important to call us sooner rather than later so we can get a game plan to make sure that your time is matching the timeline of how this is going to work.
A few things like I want to point out, like going back to some of those myths of like, oh, the market and bubble and it's crashing and wow, world is ending stuff. Like you look at the months of supply last month, 4.7 months of supply last month. Today we're at 4 months of supply. You're like, oh yeah, you're only talking like 3 weeks, right? But that's in 1 month, it's already gone up. Like that's a substantial amount. Yes, there are more houses, there are more listings on the market, but people are starting to come out and they're starting to buy. Days on market is going down slowly, which is great. Like we don't want this market to just skyrocket out of here. We want a slow, even climb, and I think that's what it's showing us right now. So your days on market is going down, which means more buyers are out there. Your months of supply is creeping down, so that'll make it shift kind of back toward a seller's market, back toward a stronger market. Appreciation, so 2 years ago, you had a negative 5.5% appreciation year over year, which that's not good. That's kind of like the crash that we felt. So when people were like,
it is good because it was correcting the 33%,
100%.
which we couldn't live at. So
100%. Yeah, so like we needed it, but it was like a soft, landing or soft blow for sellers to realize like, hey, I put my house up here. I had to drop it 5 to 10% to get a buyer, and we kind of needed that. We didn't need the crash. Like we didn't want the crash. The crash for buyers is almost like a selfish way of saying like, I want a good deal, but you don't think of like the people on the other end that are going to get caught in that crash that are going to
I don't think it's fair to keep calling it a crash. It's not a crash, it's a correction, right?
Right.
So the market needed to be corrected. It increased too much and needed a correction, and it got that correction.
Right. And we felt it like the last 2 years, right? 22, 23, we have a negative appreciation. Today, we're already back up to a 6% appreciation, right? So in 2 years, we've already grown back almost, 10, 11%.
And nationally, the national average is 4%. So it's safe to say Phoenix is a great place to invest. We're appreciating a little higher than the national average.
And then like the listing success rate, I love this too because it's gone up. So like at the low, I think we were at like a 52% listing correction. So when a house went under contract, two people agreed on selling a property, almost half the time they fell out for whatever reason, right? Tons of reasons, but they fell out. So now we're up to 75% success rate now. So now when you go under contract, you have a 75% chance that it's going to actually close. That also tells me like it's a stronger market, right?
And then the last number, and we'll move on, is the Cromford Market Index, and that is an 82 right now in the greater Phoenix area. Anything above 100 to 110 is a seller's market. The sellers have a clear advantage. Below 100 is a buyer's market. So the buyers do have the average in the greater Phoenix area right now. 2 years ago was a 131, so it's sellers, and it's definitely moved into a buyer's market. What's interesting about that is if we go over to the cities, it's very, very local. So it's felt completely different all around the greater Phoenix area.
Well, I mean, you look at like, we would call it like the inner cities, I guess, are still, very strong. So like your Chandlers, your Scottsdales, Tempe, Paradise Valley, Gilbert, are all sitting well above 100%. They are kind of slowly dropping, but staying pretty even. You have the outlying cities that, are competing with more of the new builds. It's kind of the outlying cities like you talked about, the Maricopa is getting hit pretty good right now. The Buckeye Surprise, Queen Creek, Santan, those areas, they're competing with new builds. New builds are tough to compete with now because the prices are even lower, and they're offering those incentives on the interest rates as well. So I mean, yeah, some are very strong and some are very, very weak in the greater Phoenix area.
Which is why it's important to look at it on a micro level, so you know exactly what you can get and not get in today's market, depending on what side you are on. So you have that graph, Sam. So this is the last one we're going to look at, and it's actually the percentage of closings right now that the sellers are giving buyers concessions to do things like buy their interest rate down, help come less out of pocket, etc. So what are the numbers around that?
So this graph, there's a few things that I kind of take away and like real quick on it is, so today we're at like 44% of transactions, the sellers are giving the buyers concessions. Concessions again are like toward closing costs, down payment assistance, whatever. 44% of the transactions are getting these, but the amount is still at about $9,500 on average, right? So that's very strong. But just, you know, a month or two ago, it was at like 57% of transactions were giving up to $9,500 in concessions. So that drop, you know, that 12, 15% drop in 2 months, again, tells me like there's signs of like a nice slow climb out of this, right? Like we're kind of shifting, I hate to say shifting back to a seller's market, but shifting back to like a balanced market. So like, again, if it makes sense on like a monthly payment and you want to buy, I would buy 100% if it makes sense, because here pretty soon there is a very good chance that it's going to start to getting more competitive. The appreciation is going up, interest rates are trickling down, you know, concessions are coming down, the percent of concessions are coming down, like that. Those are all signs of like a better real estate market.
A market that moves in
Stronger.
the seller's favor.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yes. Awesome. Well, that is our update of the Greater Phoenix market. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to get you local data for your specific need so we can make sure that you can accomplish your goals.